That was pretty cool.
Well, thank you all. And welcome to Michigan Central. I know a lot of you have been here before. But what I really hope is that you'll keep coming back because, we've got programming here that's going to keep you coming. This is going to be much more than just a trip down memory lane. It's going to be a vibrant place for the community. Once we get a hotel here, KC, which we're close, then we'll have food and beverage throughout the place, and you'll have
Okay, you can't steal all my questions.
Okay, fire away. Fire away.
This is when you're supposed to say hello and welcome and thank you all for being here.
Sorry about that.
Bill, it's so wonderful to see your family here. I mean, Bill, holy crap. This place is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we announced this, I think it's 7 years ago now, there were a lot of people who kind of raised their eyebrows and thought, that it wasn't going to happen or that it was going to be kind of not a wonderful restoration. And then there were a lot of skeptics that said, well, okay, fine, even if you do it, what's it really going to mean? And so, I know we'll get into that in terms of what it's going to mean. But I want to say one thing. Mayor Duggan said, mentioned the phone call he received. I got to tell you, it cuts both ways. 30 years ago, we did Ford Field together, and I didn't know Mike prior to that. We worked very closely, and it was fabulous. One thing I learned about Mike is all it takes is a handshake. You don't need to write anything down. You don't need to note it. If Mike tells you he's going to do something, he does something. And so when I said, Mike, I want to do this, he said, yep, I'll be your partner like we were the last time, and whatever it takes, we'll make it happen. And he did.
So for those of you that weren't there, almost 6 years ago, you and I did this before at Newsmakers.
Yep.
It was the time you said, everyone thought you were a little crazy, and you said, we're going to take this building and we're going to turn it into an incredible venue for Detroit. Now, we were at the Motor City Casino because you had some work to do on this place. When you're sitting here 6 years later in this unbelievably, beautifully renovated building, has it been everything you hoped? And how does it compare to what you pictured when you bought it?
Well, when you said a lot of people thought I was a little crazy, that was being very kind. But I think it's way exceeded what I thought because of this. Obviously, the group that did the renovation, the workers here, I mean, just look what they did. It was amazing. And I used to love to come down here at every stage of the renovation and just marvel at what they were doing. And it was so cool because they loved working here so much that if they would see a candy wrapper on the ground, they'd pick it up and put it in their pocket. I've never been to a construction site like that, but that's how much people loved working here. But when I say it exceeded, it's not just the restoration that exceeded, it's what's going on here. Between here and New Lab, I never wanted this to be a trip down memory lane. I mean, yes, it is, and it's an amazing trip down memory lane, but it was much more important to me that this really become a magnet for future talent and that we create the kind of campus where the Motor City could become the Motor City again. And, it's happening. And that to me is something that is the best because you can have a beautiful building, but and that's wonderful, but it's what goes on inside of it is what really matters. And I was so sick of losing our young generations to other cities. I mean, it seemed like there was a one-way ticket to Chicago for the next generation. And to me, it was so important that we keep our young people here. We provide opportunities for young people in Detroit, and that we grow the community and that we grow the technology so that people will have something to stay here for.
I think that deserves a round of applause. Thank you. Just saying. Because I couldn't agree more. You mentioned the book next door. I mentioned there's 120 startups already there at New Lab. Ford has put employees on 3 of the floors. You mentioned talent. You got a lot of the Ford executive team here. But talk about, what it's been, how it's really attracting the best and the brightest, and how that conversation has changed.
Well, it's interesting because, the conversation's really changed a lot because of what Mayor Duggan has done for the image of our city globally. So, it used to be the discussion to attract people from elsewhere in the United States or actually even overseas to say, we'd like you to come to Detroit. There wasn't a lot of enthusiasm for that. It's totally different now. I mean, over at New Lab, it's actually closer to 130 startups now we have there. And a lot of them are not from Michigan. Many of them are, from a long way away, and some are from overseas, and they love being here. But I'll tell you this. I served on a board years ago in Silicon Valley, and what I saw happening there really opened my eyes, and it really was in stark contrast to what was not happening in southeastern Michigan and what was not happening in Detroit. And it wasn't just the startups, it was the whole ecosystem around the startups. What I love about what's going on next door at the Book Depository, yeah, we have 130 startups, but we also have 20 venture capital firms in there. And the firms in there have raised over $700 million in funding. That's the kind of ecosystem you have to have a healthy tech startup scene. You can't just say, well, we'd like to have tech companies. You've got to provide them the funding. You have to have access to people like the VCs and, frankly, then to each other. And it becomes then a flywheel. And we're starting that now.
Yeah, it's incredible. It also helps when you bring them here in June and not February.
That's true.
Tough day today. Give us a little glimpse. What is the coolest or most exciting thing you've seen come out of New Lab so far?
Well, if I could just go back to what I said a second ago, I don't think it's any one technology, although there's so many very cool things that are being worked on, but it is the networked effect that's taking place there to create a whole ecosystem that will build upon itself. And so I think the next thing, and Mayor Duggan and I have talked about this briefly, is to provide an area, a zone, if you will, where these young companies can graduate to. Because the startups at New Lab, many of them are hardware startups. And the great thing about what New Lab has done is they provided all the prototyping equipment which people who make things need. But the successful companies will outgrow that, and they'll need to go someplace. And we don't want them to leave Michigan. We don't want them to leave Detroit. And one thing that we know how to do here is make things. And we're really good at that. But these young companies have to have spaces to go into. And when Mike becomes governor, we're going to be working on this to actually help provide, I don't want to call it a district, but maybe it becomes like that, a place where our young companies can graduate and stay.
Can you stop getting ahead of our script, please? Thank you. You know, it's interesting you talk about that network effect. You know, I've noticed a lot in Europe, and the automotive industry is so capital intensive now. And I've seen in Europe, they do a bit of a better job of getting even competitors together. Have you had any conversations with maybe either suppliers that compete or other manufacturers who might want to come here because of everything that's happening?
Yeah, we do, and we actually have a really good relationship. I mean, I do with Mary Barra and with John Elkin at Stellantis. You know, look, the one thing yes, we compete every day against each other, but we all want this to be a vibrant area. They're both great to work with, and so we're completely aligned in terms of how we see the development of our community. I mean, one of the things that I saw was, you know, in this little film that you did that was embarrassing, was...
so good.
was the comment, which I really believe you can't have a healthy company if you don't have a healthy community in which it resides. And that's why I think it's so important that we Ford, GM, Stellantis, all the tier ones, all the companies in this room really all pull together to solve the problems that our communities face. And I think the one thing that I've noticed through the years here is that people from Michigan love Michigan. People from Detroit love Detroit, and they will do anything they can to make it work. It's very different than other cities. You can have everybody disagree about everything else, but when you say, hey, will you help in Detroit? Will you help southeastern Michigan? There's no shortage of volunteers who want to do that.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
Okay, now let's talk about the hotel.
Yeah.
How close are we to getting a deal?
We're probably a couple months away from announcing it, maybe sooner. And it's going to be great because, as I said, it's not just going to be the hotel, which will be the top few floors of this building, but it actually will really turbocharge the food and beverage options here in the station, which is what we need to have the community come in, enjoy themselves, the people that work here come down and really, not have to leave this area. So, yeah, I'm really excited about that. We've had so many hotel chains and small boutiques want to be here, but we have to be very careful because we're not New York, and we have to make sure that we have price points all along the way that are going to support the kind of activity that goes on at New Lab, going to support the big events that were talked about earlier today. We've got a lot of big events, a lot of visitors coming here, and we want them to stay here and enjoy this.
I was waiting for that. I could feel it coming. We're in Grand Central, Michigan Central. Used to be a lot of trains here. Last month you were talking about possibly bringing trains back. Fill us in on what that could look like.
Well, it'll be awesome. So we're talking to Amtrak. Obviously, I wish we were the decision maker on this because it would happen fast, but we're dealing with Amtrak.
Is Ford getting into the train business?
Well, no, is the short answer. That would kind of be looking backwards rather than forwards, but
these guys look very capable.
Unless
over
we
here.
have autonomous trains and all that, maybe then this is the answer. But one thing that Amtrak's very excited by is connecting the Toronto, Detroit, Chicago corridor. And so that's something that we would very much like to have happen. And then, of course, we'd also like to eventually be able to, go out to Dearborn, Chicago, and go that direction too. So, I mean, we're working with them. They're very enthused about it. Canada's very enthused about it. As I say, it's if I were the decision maker, it would have happened already.
So you have to ask other people about that.
You have to ask other people, yes.
It makes things a little trickier. The city of Detroit has made so much progress ever since the bankruptcy. And as you have committed a huge amount of resources and your own personal time and energy, what are the other things that you think we all need to do to keep this city moving forward?
Well, I think it starts with education and the kids. And that's why, Lisa and I, as part of opening this station, we started this, helped start this foundation. Well, she did all the work. I just tagged along.
Lisa, we're going to get to that part too, but okay.
I think, a lot of big cities grapple with this problem, so it's not unique to Detroit, certainly. But our education for young people, and then to provide opportunities for them once they do graduate, either from high school or trade school or college, to stay here. So it's important that we start to have mentorship programs, and we're starting that we have opportunities to expose young people to what business does. I mean, a lot of, high schoolers have no idea what a business really is, how it operates, and what opportunities might be for them in that. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think it all focuses on our young kids. And as I said earlier, we don't want them leaving. We have generations of people leaving this state for, lots of different places. Before you can start to have people flow in, you got to stop them from flowing out. Yeah. So I think that's our first order of business, is to keep our young people. But to do that, we have a lot of work to do.
Well, this is definitely a step in the right direction. I'm not sure if everybody knows, but there's been a new administration in Washington for the last couple of weeks. And it's very quiet out here. Give us a little bit of an update on some of the conversations, and you and I chatted a little bit about this yesterday, but give us a quick update just on how some of those conversations are going and what that looks like.
Well, I spoke with the president. He very much wants to help our industry. He's very, very focused on having a strong American industry across many industries. And the difficulty for us, and when I say us, I don't mean just Ford, but for the whole auto industry, is that our lead times are longer than political lead times. And we can adjust to almost anything as long as we know what that path is. But what's really hard for us, the whole industry, is to get start stop when policy changes all the time. And if you look at, we've had a really cycle at the president level of, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. And with each turn of the wheel, policies change. And that's tough on us because we make many-year investments. We make billion-dollar investments in plants, equipment, technology, and importantly, too, so do our suppliers. When we talk about tariffs and all these things, and in one respect, Ford is the most American of the company. We produce more vehicles here. We employ more employees in America than anybody else. But we still are not immune to business flows, and particularly our suppliers are exposed to that. So, we're spending a lot of time making sure that the administration understands the implications for our business, because they really do want a very strong American manufacturing base. And that wasn't always true, by the way, in Washington. There were years, and there were actually even multiple years, where people kind of got mesmerized with other things, and they thought manufacturing was sort of yesterday's news. But while that was happening, other countries were incredibly eager to take those manufacturing jobs. Well, why is that? Well, it's still true today that the multiplier on one U.S. auto job is greater than on any other sector. So it's not just the direct job that you create, it's all the indirects that go with it. Other countries figured that out. And so they were very happy to build their manufacturing capability. And of course, it goes beyond that too. It really gets to, we were the arsenal of democracy during several world wars. Well, if you can't make things, you can't be the arsenal of democracy. So for all those reasons, I think this administration is acutely aware that it's important to have a very vibrant American industrial base. But they have to be aware of the implications of some of the decisions, and we're in the process of having those discussions, and I feel very good about it, frankly.
Yeah, important for them to understand the trickle down.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Ford's been an international company for well over 100 years, as has General Motors, as has Stellantis, as have many of the suppliers, and that's great. But when you start putting tariffs and barriers up, it becomes more difficult.
Did I hear a rumor that it's Ford Australia's 100th anniversary this year?
Yeah, it is. I'm going down there in a few weeks to help them celebrate. That'll be a lot of fun.
Very cool. So I got to try and get through a couple more of these. The video mentioned that now you have 3 of your children that work at Ford. Give us a little insight into how it's changed your thinking about either the culture or leadership, and what effect you hope they can have on the company.
Well, look, I mean, you work for a family company. I work for a family company.
So easy all the time.
It's always so easy. Yeah. The family dynamics that you grow up with, all of a sudden now are in the business, and that can always make for a very interesting
Thanksgiving.
Yes, and in our case, Thanksgiving, particularly with the Lions playing, it makes a particularly interesting one. But no, it's great. And Elena's here, and she's been at the company a long time, and and done an amazing job. And so I love having family in the company. And my 2 boys are here today. My mom's here today.
Hi, Mrs. Ford.
So. You should really be interviewing her. She's seen a whole lot more than I have, I'll tell you. And so Lisa and I spend a lot of time, obviously, with Alexandra and Will and Nick, and I spend a lot of time with Elena, just talking about, in this sort of an old cliche, it's an old Bible verse, but it's true: to whom much is given, much is expected. And they need to understand, and they do completely understand, that they're very fortunate to have been in the position they're in. And the company is much more than just a job. The company is an obligation. It's a way of life. It's something that, if none of us got a paycheck, we would still show up every day. And it's because as I say, it's much more than just a place to work. They all get that. And also, I will say one last thing. They also understand that any great company has to be a values-led company. And those values will express themselves differently as the generations come about, because each generation will have different interests, different opportunities. But the underlying values, taking care of each other, taking care of the communities in which we operate, taking care of the countries in which we operate, those kind of values are timeless. And I think, they all understand that, and they'll do a much better job than I have in expressing it.
Love that. This question is for both you and Lisa, and I wish I had another microphone here.
I can toss this to her if you'd like.
So I think it's incredible. In the midst of trying to do all of this, you guys set a goal to raise $10 million for children's charities in Detroit. You did 20 million, almost 20 million. It's unbelievable. So talk a little bit about the impact you hope that has as well.
Well, one of the things we discovered, Lisa discovered, I mean, again, this is all her, is that we were, as a city, we have a lot of children's-facing institutions, but a lot of them are woefully underfunded, and almost none of them had endowments. And that's very different than other cities. Other cities certainly have children's charities, but they're well endowed. And so our charities were having to go every single year to raise money just to keep the doors open. And that's a tough, tough ask. We decided that we would set up, or help set up, but certainly we didn't do it. Andrew Stein at the Children's Foundation did it, and it does a great job. But we raised money to create endowments for these kids' charities so that they can actually keep, focus now on fundraising for true impact programs and not have to worry how they're going to pay the heating bill or all those things. So it was kind of different, but it was a need that we discovered here in Detroit that we didn't know existed that's very different than other cities had.
It's amazing. All of it is amazing. Bill, Lisa, the whole Ford family, congratulations. Thank you so much for being with us today. A big thank you to the audience for helping us recognize all of the 2024 newsmakers, and we look forward to watching them create more headlines. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you. Thanks.